We're going to current Daf Mesechta Bava Metzia Daf. We begin on the bottom line of Peites Beis, where the Gemara continues related to the discussion that we had from a previous Mishnah, which we're talking about Haseiches Hapailim, the theme of the Perek, and we were talking about the rights of workers to eat. As we said, there was the rights from minig or from what you made up with them. But then there's a halacha min ha-Torah that when workers are working, they're allowed to eat, although there are certain limitations. And the same halacha applies to animals when they're working; they have rights to eat. And our Gemara continues to qualify when do we not say the rights of the animal and the worker to eat. Throughout the entire world. So we're discussing today's daf are dashos b'truma u'maiser. When the animal is threshing, trumos and maisers, which obviously had been separated beforehand, that one is not going to be over for baltachsim of leisachsim shar bedishay, as Rashi will explain specifically why that would be. Geduli truma, the growths of truma are truma. However, the Gemara is going to differentiate between that and regular truma. Meiser sheni mamin gavaya. The question is, do we say that when you give the second tithe and you bring it up to Yerushalayim, is that considered Hashem's money, or Imam Hedger, or is it considered the person's individual money? Halach of Demai, which was that when you buy produce from Am Haaretz, you're not sure if they separate appropriate tithes. That's not everything. Truma Gedela, we do assume that they did. Even really Maestros we do, but there was a minority that not. And we say, Domai, what is this? We're not sure if he separated the Maestros. Amir Nachri, that the Gemara explains that the halacha of Amir Akum, is that specifically by something like Shabbos, which is Isra Pshkilo, or do you say anything that you cannot do, you cannot tell a non-Jew to do? Chasima, the prohibition about muzzling an animal while it's doing its work. Shtiyas Yayin, a prohibition of a kohen to drink wine and then go ahead and do the avodah in the Beis Hamikdash. Sirus, the Gemara has an interesting conversation with a story that they would want to castrate their animals because they actually would work stronger, but that's a prohibition of the Torah to do that. But the non-Jew did it for the Jew. Would that make it prohibited? And Klayim, the prohibition about any prohibited mixtures. And the question is regarding who's liable, the one who went and put the animals together or the one who actually led the animals when they were mixed together, which is a prohibition of not to do with your shiur and chamor together. So we begin the current daf on the bottom of the Peites Beis, where we continue with this halacha of lesachsim shar bedishay. Again, because that's the sister lav of what we're talking about regarding a worker, that he has to be allowed to eat when he's working. So to an animal has to be allowed, you're not allowed to muzzle an ox when it's threshing. So what they would do is that they would soak barley in water and they would dry it out in the oven. Then they would thresh it with the cows to remove the outer husk. So regarding that's case number one, or as we get into Tav Tzadik Abad Aleph, case number two is v'hadoshes, with the threshing of the stalks with the foot of the animal. If it was done b'truma u'maiser, how's that possible? Truma and maiser is usually separated only after you remove the husk and you made it into smooth piles. So Rashi explains, where if they went and separated truma and maiser when they were still in the stalks. So regarding these two cases, if the person muzzles the animal, he's not violating the Isra of not to muzzle an animal while it's working. What's the reason? So Rashi explains both of them. He says the first case of hamarachsois, because the gemar malacha of these types of grains for meiser is from the time of the threshing. So therefore, it's not. Although generally it would be at a later time, but here it's already at the time of the threshing. So therefore, you don't have the isser of baltachsim. And trumas and maisris is because Taisus discusses if it's appropriate what Rashi is saying, but he says that generally dayish is not by trumas and maisris, because trumas and maisris generally is only from when it was a smoothed out pile of the grain, as it says kedagim min agoyrin. That's when you separate truma. So therefore, trumas and maisris were never included in the pasuk of lesachsim shar bedishay, because that's not generally when Trumas Amaisis would apply. So that's how Rashi explains why we're going to say that it's not going to apply to Trumas Amaisis. Okay, so these two cases, really, they look like regular cases that you would be allowing the animal to eat, because it's literally what the pasuk says, bedishai, when it's threshing, it says loisachsim. But these two cases, which they're different than regular cases, because it's has a different gemar malacha for meiser regarding the case of menachsos, and regarding trumas and meisers, it's the pasuk doesn't include them. It says the brisa aval b'nei maritz ha'ayin, but because of the appearance of wrongdoing, that people shouldn't say, look at this, the guy has the animal threshing. It's a mefurish pasuk in the Torah. So because of that, what you should do is maybe bull should bring a fistful from the same species that the animal is threshing, but and you hang it in this a basket or a bag that's hanging from the animal's neck with the food inside of it, and let it eat. Some pasha, because of maris ayin, you want to have something that it could be eating from. Maybe karshinim, you bring vetch, and you hang it, which vetch is a certain plant that you'll hang that up in the basket. Because vetch is the best type of thing for the animal. So therefore, that's what you should put inside the basket. Okay, says the Gemara, but it seems to be contradicted from the following brisa. The brisa says, you have cows that are doing this merachsis, like we said, which is the barley that was soaked and dried up already. So regarding that case, you're not violating bal taxim. Okay, so that's the same thing as our first brisa. But the second case, vadash is b'truma ma'isa. If the animal is threshing trumas and ma'isas, even mishum bal taxim. So that clearly contradicts the first brisa. This brisa says you will violate if you muzzle the animal. And then the brisa continues, if a non-Jew threshes with a Jew's cow, so Eina Oiver, the owner of the cow, who said to the non-Jew, hey, muzzle my cow and thresh your grain with it, the Jew doesn't violate Mishum Bal Taxim for the prohibition of muzzling an animal, because he's not doing it, the non-Jew is doing it for himself. And Yisrael Hadash Beparasa Shal Nachri, a Jew who threshes with a non-Jew's cow, even Mishum Bal Taxim, he will violate it because he's threshing for his own grain. So that's the second brisa. So says the Gemara, Kasha Truma Truma and Kasha Maisa Maisa. We're separating it only because the Gemara is going to attempt to give an answer for each one individually, but we said it together as one. Trumas and Maisris, when the animal is threshing, what's the halacha? The brisa number one said that you're not oiv, you're allowed to muzzle the animal. Brisa number two said you are oiv, you're not allowed to muzzle the animal. How do we resolve the difficulty? So we're separating the cases. We're saying Truma is a contradiction and Maisa is a contradiction. So the Gemara says, wait a second. I could tell you, regarding at least the case of Truma, that it's not a contradiction. Why? Kan Brisa number one that says you're not over if you muzzle the animal is bitruma. And the reason why you wouldn't be over is like Rashi has said, because Truma and Maisis are generally not there at the time of the threshing, so that's not included in the Isra of Leisachsim Sharbedishe. But can be Gedule Truma. But by what happened, Gedule Truma is what you took Truma itself and you planted it in the ground, and now there's growths from the Truma. Those growths are rabbinically as Truma, which this is one of the 18 things that Rabbi Shammai overpowered Beis Hillel, as the Gemara says in Mesechta Shabbos Abizayim Beis, and it's considered rabbinically as Truma. Now, since it's not biblical Truma, so therefore on the biblical level, it's a regularly Sachsim Shar B'dishai. It's not Truma and Meiser. It's only rabbinically Truma and Meiser. So yeah, you would be violating if you muzzle the animal by Gedulei Truma. So therefore I could resolve for Truma that it's not a contradiction. But Meiser Kasha. But the difficulty is, what do you do with Meiser? So says the Gemara, okay, what do you mean? Let's give the same answer. Great. If you're going to say Meiser Namal Kasha, it's not difficulty. Because Kan be Meiser, Kan be Gedulei Meiser. Yeah, the one that says that you're not going to violate, you're allowed to muzzle is by regular Meiser. The one that says you will is Gedulei Meiser, because Gedulei Meiser, you'll say, okay, it's only rabbinically Meiser, and says no, it's not true. Because Bishlam Gedulei Truma, at least by the growths of Truma, it's rabbinically Truma, and therefore I would have to tell you that you'll be over. Because you would have thought to say, oh, it's truma. No, I have to tell you, it's only rabbinically. Biblically, it's like not truma, and hence it's like a regular sasam shabadisha. But the growth of meiser achulin, I wouldn't have to tell you that you're over. It's not even called a meiser to call it gedule meiser. It's actually called chulin. It's not like in the Mishnah Masechtas Trumas. The Mishnah says gedule tevel, the growths of tevel, meaning if you have grain that was smoothed out in the pile, and when it was still untied, you went and you replanted it, and now it grows something. Or v'gedula meiser sheni. If you took meiser sheni, instead of eating it and treating it as meiser sheni, you went and replanted it, and now there's a growth that comes out of it. Chulin, both of them are going to be like regular chulin, and that is you could eat from it as a snack until you smooth out in the pile, because since the seed, it disintegrates, so it nullifies it from its isser. Why did you say it to me by truma? The truma is a gezer d'Rabbanan, as the Gemara explains over there in Masechta Shabbos, as a gezer because of two cases. Either because you'll have a Yisrael who will have truma that he separated. He says, Chtaf gave it to the Kohen. I'm going to take the truma. I'll plant it in the ground, not to have to give it to the Kohen because it's chulin, just like we see by Geduli Meiser, or because we're concerned about truma temeya by the hand of a Kohen. A Kohen, truma temeya, can't do anything with it. So maybe he'll hold on to it to plant it, and then, because now it's mutter, it's like bottle, but then he's going to have a takala, because by the time he's waiting to the planting season, he might have it in the cupboard or somewhere, and the kid finds the hiding place, and suddenly they ate it up. So because of that, they said it's not going to help you, because even if it's going to grow, it's also going to be truma, but it's rabbinically as a truma. But so therefore, says the Gemara, this is not an option to answer for meiser. Same when you answer for truma, because we don't say gedule meiser. So it's not even meiser. So how are you going to tell me to resolve the brayso that says you're chayiv a meiser to say it's gedule meiser? So Loikash says, okay, it's not difficult. I have a different answer for you. The second brayso is b'meiser rishon. Then you're going to violate the isser of leisachsim shar bedisha. B'meiser sheni. But or is it the other way? What do they say over there that which one's which? Meiser rishon, meiser sheni. The second brayso, right? Why are you going to be violating by meiser rishon? Because it's not. It sounds like the Gemara at this point is falling off from what it said before. The chumas and meisers are not bedisha. Yeah, meiser rishon is why wouldn't you violate? It's like a regular produce, but haba meiser sheni. But when you're not going to be violating, when is it, as the Gemara is going to explain momentarily, the meiser sheni might not be your money, it might be it might be Hashem's money, so it's not bedishay. So yeah, when we said meiser, it's not a contradiction because different types of meisers. So that's one approach you could say. If you want, you could say a different approach. You could say hava meiser sheni v'leikasha. No, they're both the same wording. When you say meiser, we mean meiser sheni. So okay, back to the contradiction. Because are you over leisachsim shabadish or not? So it's not a difficulty. The first brayso that says you're not going to be over, meaning allowed to muzzle it, even though it's threshing, is Reb Meir. Reb Yehuda, which is a machlekes. Reb Yehuda brought in kedushin of Beis and Beis, as the Gemara explains. Reb Meir the Amar meiser sheni mam gavayuhu. He holds that the meiser sheni is Hashem's money. Hashem lets you eat from it, but it's Hashem. So that's not considered leisachsim shar bidishay in his threshing. It's not his threshing. So by truma, if you're explaining now that we're falling off from what the Gemara said before, that you hold that, let's say, a meiser rishon is not a problem, meaning it's going to be a regular leisachsim shar bidishay. It's only meiser sheni because Hashem's money. So how do we understand the case of truma? So Rashi explains, if the cow is owned by a non-kohen, he's not allowed to feed the animal truma. And even if a kohen threshes with it, the Mishnah teaches a kohen that rents a cow from a Yisrael, even though the chiv mezainis is on him, he's not allowed to feed it karshine truma, vetrav truma. And that's why you're going to be pater, and you're not going to be over if you go ahead and muzzle the animal, because that's not permitted for him to have the animal eat. So that's why you won't be violating if you're muzzling the animal. That's regarding truma. And regarding meiser, is because you're also not going to violate it because it's not bedishai. It's not his threshing. It's Hashem's money. No, but since I'm saying we're not considering that it's Hashem's money, it's your money. You get to decide who to give it to, whatever. It's because it's not, but it's not Hashem's money. It sounds like that. That would be a violation. And Rabbi Yehuda and the other brises, Rabbi Yehuda, Dama Ma'aser Sheni, Maman Hediru, says that even though there's halachas of what you have to do with it, but it's a regular person's money, and therefore you're going to be over. Also because it's regarding feeding the animal. That's what I'm saying. That's a Rashi was bavaring. Truma is different than mice in that regard. Ma'aser Rishon doesn't have the halachas of hektish. I might have a monetary claim on it, but it's not the same as Truma, where that wouldn't be a violation because you can't have the animal eat from you. You have to muzzle the animal. So the Gemara says, well, heichadami, how could you even have this case of ma'aser before you're threshing it? So the Gemara says, as Rashi had mentioned before, we're talking about where he went first and the owner called on it that it's already ma'aser b'shibon when it's in the stalks. So again, you could have a case of an animal threshing on trumas and ma'asers, and we answered both for truma and for ma'aser. We said that truma is not difficult because one's gedule truma, one's truma, and for ma'aser we explain either that one's ma'aser rishon, one's ma'aser sheni, or we explain no, even if they're both ma'aser sheni, the two different texts, two different brises, one's going like Remeir and one's going like Yehuda. If Mammon is ma'aser sheni is your money, then you're going to be over leisachsim, or if it's Hashem's money, you're not going to be violent. It's not bedishai. But then says Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda, since you're telling me that according to Rabbi Yehuda, it has a shame of ma'aser on it. So although that it's a person's own money, but you need it to be in the walls of Yerushalayim, and not let it eat ma'aser sheni out of the walls of Yerushalayim. So how are you coming with the love of leisachsim, and that you're letting the animal eat from it, and it's overriding the negative prohibition of leisuch. It has to be eaten only in Yerushalayim. So how could you allow it to be eaten at this point? We're talking about where actually the threshing is going on within the walls of Beis Pagi, which that was the outer circumference of Yerushalayim, which they added on called Beis Pagi. So actually we're talking about where it's inside the walls of Yerushalayim. Ibai Sema says, another way to resolve the difficulty of ma'aser, the contradiction, are you allowed to muzzle the animal or not? The first brice that says that you're not over, you're allowed to muzzle the animals, but ma'aser vadai is definite trumas, is by definite ma'aser, and kamba ma'aser demai. But the second brisa, which holds that you are going to be over, is by ma'aser that you bought from the Amaretz, meaning when you buy from Amaretz, the chiyuv of separating ma'aser is only rabbinically. Because you have to separate ma'aser sheni al safik. You're not sure did he separate or not, and you have to bring up to Yerushalayim. So since it's not biblical, it's only rabbinic. Okay, so therefore it could be bedishai, because it might not be even ma'aser sheni. So therefore, that's why we say that you're going to be over l'sachsim shabedisha. Says the Gemara, hashdas lahach. But now that you're coming to this answer you just gave, meaning you're saying you should assume that he didn't separate. That he didn't separate because most people wouldn't separate. What? It should be vadai. Yeah, interesting. Meaning it's still in the whole case is only applicable when it's a hikdim b'shabolim. So why would you even say when you buy from Amaretz? Why would you even think that maybe that he even did it? You should think that he didn't do it. Okay, I mean, but then for sure you'll be over l'sachsim shabedishay. But it sounds like that when you say ma'aser demai, what it sounds maybe you're buying the ma'aser from. It's like the Amaretz is saying that it's his ma'aser, right? The Rashi makes it sound that shechav l'hafish ma'aser sheni ala safek. Is it where he's saying that maybe it's talking about where he's saying that he separated? I did all the separated my Maisers or whatever. And this is he's saying what's Meiser Demai? Isn't it where it's Meiser of Demai, or he's telling you Meiser? The Amar is saying, oh, this is my Meisers. Right, no, I'm saying because the contrast of the two cases, Kamba Meiser Vada, Kamba Meiser Demai, the Meiser Vada is you're actually threshing the Meiser itself. And we're saying, so then you're not going to be over because we're saying, let's say it's Hashem's money. So it's not Israel Hashem Adisha. When we say Meiser Demai, what's the case of Meiser Demai? You're buying from Amaretz his Meiser, and then you're like, is this really Meiser? You know, so or is he selling you regular produce? What? Regular produce.
So why would he say it's Meiser? Just
right. So that's what he's.
Drops the value.
No, but I'm saying right. No, it's saying that it's regular produce, and you have to separate Meisers from that. But that's regular produce. Then that it sounds like that he's probably giving you. What do they don't say anything? What they say, but it sounds like they're probably giving you. He's saying he's giving you Meiser, because that's the case with him. If it's not Meiser, then what's the chiddush? Obviously, that unless this is the Meiser you separated from what you bought from Nama Oretz, and now it's Meiser Demai. That's probably the case I was talking about. You separated from what you bought from him, and this is that Meiser that you're threshing now. On that, you still have to go ahead and. So that's what we're saying that, but that's what he's asking. He's saying, but why Meiser Demai? Any person that you buy from when it's still in the stalks, you should assume that it's that. Of course, no Meisers were separated. So what's the chiddush? What? Right, that's I think the answer, to say that the guy told you I did it already, and the regular guy, you can believe him. I'm art, you don't believe him anyways. So that's what we're saying, that would be the case. That's probably what the answer is. So it says the Gemara, Hashdas lahachi. Now that you came to that, Truma namalei kasha. Then you could say the same thing for Truma. Why don't you say Kama Truma is Vadi, Kama Truma is Mai? Why don't you say the same thing, that to resolve the contradiction of Truma, when did we say that you could muzzle the animals regular Truma? When did we say that you can't is by Truma of Demai, because that's only rabbinic halacha, and that should still be a violation of Wasachsim Shabbatisha. Gemara says, no, it's not true. Because Bishlam and Maisa Demai Ikam, there is a element of separating Meiser from Demai, which is when you buy produce from Ama Oretz. The Truma is Demai Me'ika. Do you think there is even such an idea of having Truma of Demai? There is no such a thing. Because we're talking in the Brisa that Afhu Yechon Kan Gadol Mesechta Seida Memches Me'alev, he was beetle as a vidui. He nullified. Well, there's two things we're talking about. One thing is not related to what we're talking about, but he nullified this what's called vidui meiser, of the confession of when you bring your meisters, even of Tamid Chachamim, they don't say anymore the phrase of Bi'arti HaKodesh Min HaBayis, which is a pasuk in the Torah that I liquidated all the holy things from my house. And it says in the pasuk, "Begam nesativ leLevi." I also gave it to the Levi. The reason why he nullified this vidui, this confession, is because they didn't give the Meiser Rishon anymore to Levi according to the halacha, as the Gemara discussed in Seit Daf Memches, because the Torah says they give it to the Leviim. But Ezra HaSefer penalized because he didn't see they coming up to Yerushalayim, to Eretz Yisrael. So he said to give it to the Kehanim, as the Gemara says in Yevamos Daf Pevav. So that's one thing he did. He nullified. You can't say anymore because it's not appropriate, the words. And also, because al demai, he decreed when someone buys from Am Oretz that he should separate everything out of doubt, because Tevel is a severe sin of death, except for Truma, that he was not goyzer that you have to separate, and he was not goyzer demai on that. And the reason is Lefisha Shalach b'chol Gvul Yisrael. He sent throughout the entire boundaries of the Jewish people, and he saw that they were Amaratzim who were disgracing the laws of Meisers. The only thing they separated was Truma Gedayla. So therefore, he was geyser on everything else but Truma Gedayla. So there is no Truma of Demai, therefore that wouldn't be an appropriate answer. So Ella says, like Kasha, no, it's no difficulty, because I could actually tell you, Khan, the first Bryce said the Truma's Meiser Vadai. Not Truma, you're right, Truma doesn't have and the halach of demai, but Trumas Meiser, which is the Levi separates to the Kohen Meiser from his Meiser, which that's called Truma, and it's forbidden like Truma. So when did we say that you're going to be over, that you're not going to be over loisachsam, that you're allowed to muzzle the animal, is by Trumas Meiser Vadai. definitive, which that's not yours. When did we say that you're going to be over, that it is a violation when there's trumas ma'isa b'demai, which since biblically it is yours, it's only rabbinically that we can treat it as not. Therefore, again, that's the same type of approach that you could say the way we had said regarding the answer for ma'isa. Now the Gemara moves on that will relate back in the related discussion. But even name it Rav Sheshes, as from Sheshes on this halacha of lisachsim shar b'dishay, they not let muzzle the animal. What happens if hoisa oichelus umastreses mahu? What's halacha if the ox had a bowel, had a digestive problem, that it was releasing this liquidy waste matter, and it had an upset stomach, and wheat was very harsh for its stomach. What's the halacha? It suffers from some type of indigestion. What's the question? So the Gemara explains the question. Mishum de malahu is because it's beneficial for the animal when it's threshing not to deprive it from food of a holy mala. This is not good for it because it's getting diarrhea from what it's eating. Maybe the reason for is for different reasons, because it's season, it's pain. You're working with food and you work in the canteen and you can't eat from the pizza and the fries and this and that. There's no bigger tzar b'alechaim. So b'chazim mitzar. So the animal season, it's getting in pain. So you have to let it eat. So do you let it eat or not? It depends on the principle of why we have it, and the Gemara is clearing on that question. Some of Shesha is tinisua. We learned this in one of the brises we just mentioned before. We mentioned Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, Rabbi Shimon. He says that maybe karshina b'toila. He said that really we said two cases that biblically are not chayiv and leisachsim shabedishay, but because of Marazayin, the Tanakama said, okay, bring a fistful of the same type and put it in a basket. Shimon ben Yochai said no. He said bring vetch and hang it from its neck. Because vetch is the best thing for the animal. Oh, what you see from this is that the whole reason why we have that it's eating when the threshing is because we want the best thing for it. So here that we want to have the best thing for it, you hang veg. You see that the big thing is for the best thing, not because it's season, it's pain, and therefore you actually would be potter when it's masrezes, when it has diarrhea. You actually would not let it eat because we don't care about its pain. We want the best thing for it, like a mother and a child. If the kid wants, shevelet is not good for you. You can't have gluten. You can't have this. You know you're going to break out in hives. So therefore, that's the halacha. Now, the following question. What's the halacha? Can you tell a non-Jew, muzzle my cow and thresh with it, which is your threshing? So what's the question? When do we say when do we say that telling a non-Jew is rabbinically forbidden? Shabbos. That's regarding Shabbos to Issa Skila. That because we know how severe Shabbos is, that is being stoned to death. But muzzling, which is only a negative prohibition, maybe we don't say this. Or maybe there's no difference. So this Gemara Tashma being a raya in the brayso we mentioned before. Said Nachri had dash beperas. So one of the cases parenthetically we had mentioned was a non-Jew that thrashes with a cow of a Jew. Said Eino Ev Mishum Bal Tachsim. So the Jewish owner of the animal doesn't violate Bal Tachsim. So even though he tells the non-Jew, here, take my cow, go thresh with it and muzzle it as you're threshing with it. So it sounds like from the wording of the Bryce, Ma'abahud le'over, he doesn't violate. But that wording makes it sound like to get a punishment. But it sounds like Isur Ikka, but there is a rabbinical prohibition of Amir La'akim, of telling the non-Jew to violate the Isur of L'sastim Shabadisha. No. You now tell a non-Jew to do a malacha for Shabbos, even if you don't have a benefit. You can't tell him to do a malacha. Well, we're going to talk about it in a second regarding when it's for the non-Jew himself to do his own thing, right? So Tais actually says seems to be a machlekes Rashi and Tais on this, and Tais himself brings this down. What does it mean chasam parasi b'dash? But Tais says b'dash b'tru asi, thresh my grain, where he's gaining Amir La'akum, the Tvuas Nachri, he says obviously would be pasha that mutter because the Jew's not gaining anything by the muzzling. To the contrary, he's losing. His animal's not getting fed. So just like you're allowed to tell Nachi, go eat Nevela, for that reason you're allowed to tell Nachi and Shabbos, here, go ahead, take this meat and cook it for yourself, because he has no responsibility to feed him. He's not gaining by telling the non-Jew something. That's how Tais originally explains. But then he says, Emiu Amari, which is how Rashi explains, that no, it's not true. It's not the same thing as telling a non-Jew, go eat that pork sandwich at that restaurant. Because there's no Amir La'akim, because the Jew himself is allowed to feed the non-Jew non-kosher. But here, the thing that he's telling the non-Jew to do, he cannot do. He's not allowed to cook on Shabbos. He's not allowed to muzzle the animal. And therefore, that is a question the Gemara has, would be forbidden to even tell him to do his own threshing, which he cannot do, but you're not allowed to tell the non-Jew to do it. So the Gemara says, no, it's not a raya from the wording of the Brisa, that you're not oiver, but it's not like there's an isser. But then the truth is, no, maybe there's no even prohibition of telling the non-Jew to muzzle your ox and thresh with it. It's just, I did the time to say, since we learned the other case, that's the contrast. Yisrael hadosh beperasa shel nachi oiver, when the Jew rents the non-Jew's cow, he threshes his own threshing, then he will violate. So tell the Reisha and Oiver, the Reisha and Oiver, but it's not even just not Oiver, not even an Isser. It's not a Raya. It could be there's no even Isser of it, Mir La'akim. So the Gemara says, okay, Tashma tried to bring another Raya. The Sholchu Le'lavu de Shmuel, they sent to the father of Shmuel, Halin Taire. There were these bulls, as you get into with bays, the Ganvin Aramoy. The non-Jews would steal the Jews' bulls, Umeganchin Yasan. They would castrate them. Then they would return it to the owner, and as Rashi explains, they were good non-Jewish neighbors. They actually loved the Jew. They knew, and this is where you have this Amir La'akim thing. He says, "Yeah, I know you're Jewish. I know you can't castrate the animal, Sam, but I know that your animal's not really working up to par. So what the non-Jew does, he steals the animal of his friend Sam. He castrates it because it actually plows better." That's what a bull is. What is a bull? What's an ox? Most people can't even differentiate. It's when they're castrated. And then they actually work better. They're stronger then. So they would steal them, castrate them, and give it back to the Jew. Ma, what's the halacha? They asked him, what do you do in such a case? So Shalchli sent to them, Harama Isavid Bahu? Oh, they're doing harama. They're doing they're scheming to circumvent the prohibition. Arim olayu, so you have to scheme to deprive them. Dabnun, and the Jew is not allowed to benefit from the sin that his neighbor Mark is doing him a favor. Sam, I'm going to do this for you. No, I can't. Now I can't have benefit. And he did it so that it should be good to plow. So we penalize him that he cannot plow with it, and he has to sell it. So obviously we see that even by a negative prohibition, not just Shabbos, that's skila, there's an issa of a milhakim. You're not allowed to have a non-Jew do something forbidden, even by a negative prohibition of like castration, just like we discussed regarding muzzling. So Amar Papa says not true, it's not a raya. Why not? Because this is worse. B'nai Marava, the those in the West in Eretz Yisrael who sent this to the father of Shmuel like this, Sabri law, they hold Kirab Chidka. Jabur and Sanhedrin that Menvov and Beis, they're coming that he says, B'nai Noach Mitzuvin al Siris. The non-Jews, in their commandments, there's a commandment not to castrate. And therefore, V'ka'avri, this guy who's telling him to castrate is violating Mishum B'lifnei Iva L'Sita Michshol. In front of a blind person, you shouldn't put a stumbling block. So therefore, the reason why is because of Lifnei Iva. But something that the non-Jew is not prohibited, like muzzling, I would say if the non-Jew muzzles, actually would be permitted. So it's not a raya. Here, the castration is not because of the Jew's negative prohibition. It's because the non-Jew is prohibited in that, and you're over lifnei iver, and you can't be benefiting from that. So the Gemara tells us, Savar Rav Lamemer, Rabbi thought to say, again, so the Gemara didn't answer the question. But now, once we mentioned this idea that you cannot benefit when the non-Jew would castrate it for him, that he held Yemachul L'Shchita. It has to be sold for the purposes of slaughtering, meaning we don't want that the castration should even be beneficial for the monetary value, because we don't want you to allow it to be plowed, because you fetch a higher price because it was castrated. So not only do we not want you to benefit that you're plowing, we don't want you to even be selling it for the plowing price. You can only sell it for a slaughtering, which it doesn't go up in value that it was castrated. Abai says, no, dayin shekanasta le'mechira. It's enough that you penalized him that he has to sell it, that that he can't get the benefit of plowing it, because the whole tircha was only for him to plow it, and the scheme didn't work, and therefore, even if he sells it to someone who wants to plow with it, that would be allowed. Now that you have to sell this animal, so the Mazhab Pshita, it's obvious that B'nai Gadol, his adult son, ki achar dami, is like someone else. In other words, it's enough if he sells it to his adult son who lives around the corner, and he could have him go ahead and get the animal. But B'nai Katnai, what's halacha with his minor son? Would that be sufficient for this halacha of needing to sell off the castrated animal? So Rav Achi Asi says, no, that's forbidden because that's just a joke. That's from your right pocket to your left pocket. Rav Ashi says it's permitted. No, the Maisa, you don't own it. Your 7-year-old owns it. Gemara brings a story that Merema Mazutra, some say, no, it's Hani Trei Chasidi, these two pious ones. It doesn't say who they were. Mechalfi Adadi. Their oxen that their non-Jewish neighbors stole from them and castrated and gave it back to them, you have to sell it to someone else. They sold it to each other. Now, Taisa says not true. The top Taisa says, really, their friendly non-Jewish neighbors had done it without their intention. So really, it wasn't like where the guy, Sam, was telling his neighbor Mark, says, Mark, I can't plow as well as you could. Look at your engine, look at my, my measly, plow over here, because it's Jewish law. Really? Yeah, I can't castrate my animal. Oh, really? Okay, fine. So that was harama. But these two Talmidei Chacham, they didn't want. The guys on their own came and did it. But they still, so why'd they swap it then? It shouldn't be prohibited. Either, says Taisa, because people wouldn't believe them, that they weren't aware. Oh, yeah, nishkivet. Okay, very good. Right? Or because people shouldn't say that to do the same chap. People are going to say to their non-Jewish neighbors to do it, and they say, also, yeah, we had no clue. We didn't realize. Okay, so that's why they swapped it. But that's why they used the heter of swapping it, because really it shouldn't have been us in the first place. Now we continue with this halacha of leisachsim. Rambam asked the following question: What's the halacha if he put a thorn in the animal's mouth to stop it from eating it? What's the halacha? Is that a violation of leisachsim? What do you mean? You put a thorn in his lips? Of course, it's a bona fide Muslim. You can't eat. Of course, you're going to violate leisachsim. No, says if let's say it on its own had a thorn that entered into its mouth, and now it cannot eat when it's threshing. Is there a mitzvah to remove it so that it's not muzzled, or is there no mitzvah to remove it? That's question number one. Question number two is that hirbitz la'ari mebachutz mahu. What's the halacha if, let's say, you put a lion outside the threshing floor, and now it's so scared, this ox, because of the lion? What's the halacha? So you must say hirbitz la? You mean you really took a lion and you put it outside where it's threshing? Chasim al yasa, that's a bona fide muzzling. Of course, you know it's not going to be able to eat. How could you do that? No, what's the halacha if the lion on its own happened to be visiting right next door? Do you have a chiyuv to remove the lion or not? Question number three, Hamed benam b'chutz ma'u. What's the halacha if you put the animal's child? Taisa has a girsa that the girsa is actually amad benam b'chutz. That if, let's say, its child was happened to have been standing on the outside, but we have a girsa of Hamed. You put the animal on the outside. So Taisa actually says, interestingly, in Divrei Maschal Ravat, he says that all these questions are what's called imtim tzaloima. If you say that it has a thorn, it's forbidden because the muzzling is in the animal itself, it's in the lips. But a lion which is further away, maybe that wouldn't be muzzling. And if you say that a lion is also muzzling, that's because of the fear of the lion that can't eat, even if it's starving. But when its child is on the outside, that's not such a muzzling, because that, okay, the child's there, but it's not as strong as the fear of the lion. So that's the question about, would maybe these not be considered as muzzling? Now, what happens if Haiset Tzemei L'mayim? What's halacha if, let's say, it was very thirsty for water, so it can't eat pasha because it's very thirsty? Again, these are all further away questions. Are they still considered a chiyuv to take care of that? Do you have to give it to drink? Or let's say paras l'katevlia al gabi disha. Let's say the guy put out a piece of leather over the kernels, and the animal's walking on top of it. Now, the animal doesn't see the threshing. Well, what's the halacha? Is that considered bidisha or not? And like we said, it doesn't see it, so maybe that wouldn't be a chiyuv. So the Gemara says, Pashud miha, you definitely could resolve from the brisa chada one of these questions you asked. The ten like learn the brisa. The brisa says a contrast of who's allowed to do what. Rishai bala para. Right, that would seem to be right. Right, if it's mali or because of or it sees sabal chaim, or do you say that no, there's not bedisha? It's even for the mali law, it's a hastenish bedisha because it's underneath, but that's not what it's doing. Yeah. So says the Gemara, meaning because meaning there's no mali law because if it's beneficial to an animal when it's doing that to eat, but if it's not seeing it, not because of its pain, pasha, it's not. There's no mali law. It's like I'm getting a benefit, but it's not. It would seem like you would have the question even on the mali law. So the Gemara says that Rishai Bal Para, the owner of the cow, who rented out his cow for the other guy to thresh with it, he's allowed to be lahar parasi, allowed to starve his cow. Great, I'm getting a renter for my cow. I'm not going to feed it for the day before. It's going to get to eat up when it's threshing. Now the other way is also true. But at the same time, the renter is allowed to spread out bundles of straw that was threshed in front of the animal, so that it shouldn't be eating from his kernels of wheat a lot. So either one could use strategies to gain the most of the situation. But one thing is, it's essentially spreading out the leather, and you see that you're allowed to spread out something else to prevent it from eating. So l'chayra, that should answer the question. So you say, no, shani hasn't. There's different. Ultimately, the animal is eating the straw. Here, it's not going to be eating anything because the leather is over it. So that's not a raya. Okay, the Gemara didn't answer the question. Or ibaysim, if you want, you could say, no. The reason why you can't prove it from here is because this of Rishai Balabayis Lahata Beki Amalef Nebehema. This that we said you're allowed to spread out the straw in front of the animal. That means me'ikara. Beforehand, before the animal starts threshing, let it fill up its belly from straw before it goes into where it's threshing. It shouldn't eat a lot from the threshing. Maybe during the threshing, maybe you're not allowed to. Again, therefore, it wouldn't be a riot. The Gemara continues to ask questions. Where he says, what happens if chasma mibachutz? Mahu. What's the halacha? Are you allowed to muzzle the animal on the outside before it comes into thresh? What's the question? The Gemara explains. The Torah says you can't muzzle ox when it's threshing. Well, when I muzzled it, it wasn't threshing. I didn't know. It means the Torah is telling you it shouldn't be threshing when it's muzzled. So is it on the maisa or is it on the chalois? Meaning when it's actually threshing, it can't be muzzled. So Amalei, so Reb Simoy answered Rabbi Yomi, from your father's household you should learn this because he was a kohen. The Torah says, wine and hard liquor you shouldn't drink. You and your sons, together with you when you come into the Beis Hamikdash. Now, he says, you think it's only when you come in that it's forbidden, but if you drank beforehand, then you're allowed to come in. It's only when you're entering that you're not allowed to drink. What do you mean? The Torah says, the Torah says that you have to be able to separate between the holy and the profane, that you can't be drunk. You have to know how to act in the Beis Hamikdash. If a guy drank beforehand, he's still a shikur. He still does not know how to separate. Ella, rather, you learn from the Amahas, just like it doesn't mean don't drink when you're entering. It means when you're entering, you shouldn't have been drunk. It means that when you're threshing, you shouldn't have been muzzled. You can't muzzle beforehand and say, oh, well, it was beforehand. So you must have termed learn the brisa. If someone muzzles a cow, but he didn't put it over the threshing, his friend goes and uses that cow for threshing. Or case number 2, if someone puts an ox and the donkey hatched to a wagon, now his friend comes and leads them. So the first guy in these 2 cases is pater. It doesn't get lashed. He didn't do anything. It's the second guy, the one who threshes with them, or with the animal that's muzzled, or the guy who leads the 2 animals together, because the Torah says tidish bechasima. The Torah is telling you. By Klaim also says sacharesh. The malk is only the guy who actually does the leading of the animals. Now, itma we learned regarding these two prohibitions, chasama b'koil. If, let's say, you muzzle the animal with your voice, what does that mean? Which is, let's say the animal is bending down to eat, and you shout at it, so it stops eating. Or v'enhiga b'koil. Or let's say you lead these two animals that are a klayim, because there's a shor and the chamar together. You don't hold on to the goat. You lead them with your voice. You shout at them, and there they go. So we have machlekes where we're going to discuss in length at tomorrow's daf. Rabbi Shloimy says chayiv, you're going to be liable. Shlokish Amepata says you're going to be pata. What's the reason for the machlekes? Rabbi Shloimy says you're going to be chayiv because akimas piv have a maisa. The contortion of your lips is an action. You're moving your lips. So therefore, it's what's called a lav sheyesh b'maisa. It's a negative prohibition that has an action to it. So you're going to get lashes. Shlokish Amepata says you're going to be exempt because kala Allah have a maisa. Your words, your voice is not an action. And the lav shema maisa, a negative prohibition that does not have an action, one does not get lashes. So therefore, this machlekes, if you're going to be violating these two lavin with your voice. Thank you for any time.